Hey everyone, welcome back to Mission Impact Series with Tracy and Ty. We're still on number 3 of how do trends affect social impact businesses. We talked about board members, we talked about donors and contributors, and now we're going to talk about volunteers because trends affect how volunteers volunteer for you, or if you can even get volunteers. Let's be honest, right? If this is your first time catching us, my name is Tracy B. Allen. I'm the owner of TVA Consulting Group, where I help social impact businesses, change agents, right, to design, build, and fund their social ventures so that they can live the lifestyle that they desire while impacting their communities.
All right, my name is Ty Boone. I'm owner of Ty Boone Enterprises. I work mostly with nonprofit organizations, helping them to move from startup and struggle to sustainability and success. And girl, we love volunteers. We love volunteers, but you know
Yes.
what? Gas is $100 a gallon. No, it's hard out here to get
Yep.
people over here to give you their time, and you ain't giving them no money.
Mhm.
That's kind of how it is, right?
Yeah.
Um, Volunteers are still there. They're still plentiful. A lot of universities, colleges, and places like that, they'll assist you with providing you volunteers. I think it really matters, how strong a volunteer you need and what you need for them to do and what you have
Mhm.
to train. We talked about training a couple of series ago. Um, do you have that kind of effort to put into a volunteer? Number one, and then
Mhm.
number two, do you have is if there's no resources for them, it's going to be highly unlikely that they're just going to be fawning all over you to volunteer because
Right.
time for that. I'm just
Well, I mean, seriously, I mean, if you have volunteers that are driving into a facility that you have, are you going to give them mileage? You're not paying them to be volunteers, but are you going to reimburse them for the gas that they took to come to
kidding.
your organization? Do you have that capacity to do that? So if you don't, one of the things that I tell people is the best thing to do is to look at people who are in and around the neighborhood that you serve. Instead of having someone come from a different town, you may need to have a volunteer fair in your neighborhood and try to tap in to the local resources that I'm talking about, people in walking distance, because this is a big problem right now. Is not
Mhm.
people not they're not getting the gassing up their car to come volunteer.
Mm.
Like they have to be very well established financially to want to do something like that. And most of the volunteers that volunteer at places are not that. And that's just statistical fact,
Yep.
right? Most of the volunteers are like Pete Ty talked about, people who have been in that situation and came out of the situation and now they're doing a little better. They've graduated, but they don't have a PhD, right? They have a high school diploma, right? So, or they may have a bachelor's degree, but they're not at PhD level, right? So being cognizant of that. So if you have the ability to have some of that volunteer work being done remotely, that is something that you need to think about. That's what we talk about, SOPs and all of that stuff, changing up some of your bylaws, looking at them, revamping them, how you deal with your, not only your board members, your volunteers, your staff, and the clientele that you're serving, right? We want to make sure that we're being as green as possible in our interactions with people, right? So we don't need to fly all over the place. We don't need to, what do they call it? Have people get in their cars for nothing, just come and have a meeting. You can do that in Zoom. Oh, you
Right.
don't like Zoom? Oh well. This is the new age. This is what we're doing. So we're gonna have a Zoom meeting, or call me on the phone if you want to. But that is just kind of how it's being done. So
Mhm.
you need to be very cognizant of that. And sometimes even too, like the volunteer hours, the hours that you want people to volunteer, because they have lives of their own too, and they're giving up of their time to come and give back to the community. But I see a lot of organizations where they run their volunteers ragged,
Mhm.
and that's not a good thing.
And
So.
volunteering is a service. It shouldn't stress out your volunteer.
Mhm.
Some people, like you said, they run their volunteers ragged. The volunteers, like I volunteered once. I don't never want to volunteer ever again in my life because those people over there at that business, they tripping, right? And
Right.
understanding what roles your volunteer play, and we'll probably talk about this in another session at some point in the future. But
Mhm.
things, the jobs that you have them doing, do they make sense? Are they allowable? Because some things the
Mhm.
volunteers are not even supposed to be doing.
Right.
Or what those things are, and just being understanding of
Mhm.
times, the gas, mental health, all kinds of
Mhm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You have to take into consideration, and you have to be careful, and you have to really understand that a volunteer they're giving of themselves. They're
Mm-hmm.
really not giving anything in return, so you have to appreciate that.
Right. And not putting your volunteers in dangerous situations,
Hmm.
making sure that your volunteers are always safe as possible, especially if you have volunteers that are going out into the community to do outreach work. You want to send them out in teams of two, making sure that they have an adequate cell phone because depending on the economic status of your volunteers. So there are a lot of things, especially in today's day and age, that you really need to take into consideration because people are on high alert, man. Like people are on edge. They may knock on the wrong person's door and it turns into a bad situation. Do not
And
send your volunteers out in singularity. You need to send them out in pairs, and somebody got to be a strong person in the pair. You can't send two people out who are meek. It just doesn't work. Right, right.
come
You
over here.
have to look at your volunteers, look at their strengths, look at their weaknesses, and pair them up accordingly, and make sure that they mesh as well, because then that can become a whole other
Mhm.
thing. But
And though you're
yeah,
supposed to have insurance anyway for your businesses, before you also have to make sure that you have insurance
I was going to talk
when you're
about
going
that.
to
Yeah.
utilize volunteers. I mean, you're supposed to have it anyway, but a lot of
Mhm.
y'all are not doing it, right? But you got to make sure that you're covered and that you're covering them. You know,
Mhm.
they're out representing your organization, number one. So if something happens in the name of your organization, then you're liable for that. Then
Mhm.
for them, even if they're just coming to the event, putting up a box, what happens?
Mhm.
What happens if you're not covered?
Mhm.
And people are not thinking about that, Tracy. It's like
No.
you have to fuss for days. Like, get some. Why isn't your business insured? And you got 15 events over the summer.
Yeah.
You got
I have
you
a client. I have a client like that who's constantly having events and has never had insurance for the business. I was like, you are so lucky. But moving forward, you will have insurance because that is a very dangerous game that you're playing,
Mhm.
and it's only but so far you can go, and then it catches up with you. So, yeah. So that's it for volunteers, guys. Thank you for joining us. So the last thing we're going to be talking about in this series is how trends affect grant makers, because it does affect where your money comes from. All right, till then, bye guys.